Welcome back to Get Your House in Order, the podcast with my brother, Chris. We are actually not in the same studio right now. So you have been traveling, Chris, all over the place. And before we jump into our theme for today, talking about the power of the morning, just give us a kind of a quick recap of what has been happening in the Medici world. Where have you been? Who have you met? What exciting things are happening?
So our event manager is Leonie, and she's also kind of responsible for my travel schedule when I do Medici days in different cities around the world. And she has as a background as a musician, and so I think she thinks of me as like a rock star, like on tour or tournée, and so she gets these crazy venues and then makes sure that everything is set up when I arrive, which is fantastic and takes a lot of stress out of my scheduling. And then I've got Paula, my assistant, who works with miracles on my calendar. So I am very fortunate to have a team kind of working on my travels. But yes, I've been literally around the world. A couple of weeks ago, I was in South America, in Uruguay and Argentina for the second time. I was there last year. Went to Buenos Aires. There's a direct flight from Lufthansa from Frankfurt, which I think is the longest flight from Lufthansa. And I love the city of Buenos Aires, not just for the incredible good food that you can eat. I had some amazing steaks and asados, as they call it down there, but actually the friendliness. I was really surprised. We as Germans, we're not known in the world for being friendly. In fact, you always get a culture shock when you arrive in Germany at the airport and nice German customs greets you. They sound like out of a Nazi movie, if you ask me. But I was very nicely surprised again on how warm and friendly South America is. Even much warmer, I would say, than the south of Europe, which obviously Italy and Spain is where I love to be here in Europe. So anyhow, I was there and I met some wonderful South American families. I spoke at a few different events. There's one Medici family who's part of our community who actually bought a huge plaza at the center square in Montevideo, which is the capital city of Uruguay, and they really refurbished that plaza into an incredible business hub. There was a radio station. I did my first radio interview in Spanish. So if you Google my name, you'll actually find me speaking Spanish and talking about life and business and economy in Europe at the moment. And then we went to Punta del Este, which is kind of the hotspot for the wealthy families from South America. They all seem to have a place. I heard Peter Thiel just bought a huge compound there. It's kind of a hideaway space in Uruguay. And Argentina is actually, if you think of a crazy changing world in terms of economics and geopolitics, it's a very safe space, a very stable, very good economy, good politics, and an incredible environment to set up your company. I met with a bunch of also younger entrepreneurs, a few guys who did an exit, and I asked them about their taxes, and I was surprised. This sounded like an offshore haven, but actually it's a great business setup. So anyhow, I was there. I was all over Europe here. Last week I was in Serbia for the first time in Belgrade. Did some interviews with Bloomberg, Adria for Euronews, and spoke at a very interesting business club that supposedly only has like 75 members, but these 75 members make out 40% of the GDP of the country. So it was quite, let's say, prestigious. But what I was very positively surprised is the depth and the level of thinking when it comes to legacy. Obviously, my theme at the moment, as I just published my book From Success to Significance, is I'm leading conversations on what for us as business people is there beyond success that we can be working on. And then to be honest, there are a lot of business people who have no clue on how to answer that question because they are so just focused in on the business stuff that they literally have not much to say when it comes to things of significance. They're just not there yet in their thinking. also their stage of life, perhaps, and their career, which I understand. But that's where we want to lead this conversation into another level of depth. And obviously, I'm also benefiting greatly because I'm learning from some business families who have set up let's say their business empire way beyond just their current company, and so yeah, I had some great conversations, and now I spent some time over Christmas, not Christmas Eve, sorry. It feels like I've done so much this year already. It feels like we're at Christmas now, but actually it was Easter. So
The year's
I
over. You
just
can retire for the year.
yeah, I'm kind of coming out of Christmas holiday here.
People in the community ask me all the time, do you travel as much as Cris does? And I always have to smile because I actually made the decision that when my kids were born, so most of people listening know that I have two small kids, one and three. And when my wife was pregnant with Zoe, I actually did a trip, and that was my last trip, a longer trip. I did 6 weeks in the US. And I did 20 states in 6 weeks, speaking over 100 times in different locations. And then when my kids were born, I actually made the decision to just be home, and really be present in that first phase of the small kids. So Cris is the one with the running shoes. He and I stay home.
And lots of miles and more
front.
points, and lots of credit card points for all that travel. That's right.
They greet you with a first name in the lounges, so they know you're coming. So today we're going to talk about the power of the morning, and let's tie it back to your travel before we jump into kind of the power of the morning. Reclaiming the first hour before the world takes over is kind of the theme that I want to kind of for us to unpack today. But when you're traveling, my experience has been, because I did a lot of travel, your every routine, and I am a big fan of routines. I believe it actually creates freedom rather than constraint, if we set it up correctly. But when you travel, your whole routines are basically messed up. So Cris, when you travel, how do you think of your routines and the power of the morning when you're on the road and when everything is basically changing? You are jumping time zones and places. Often you don't know where exactly you are staying, how everything will work out. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so a few different comments when it comes to the morning routine while you're traveling. So first of all, I never book breakfast in a hotel. So my assistant, she books the hotels, and there are only a few things that she needs to tick on a booking or wherever she does the booking. I don't even know. One of them is that I always want to have a fitness studio in my place. Actually, that's and that needs to be a 4 or 5 star hotel. So there's and in a good location where I can get quickly in and out. But I never book breakfast, and the reason is very simple. I don't want my morning routine to be kind of boxed into me standing in line with other people at a breakfast buffet or something. If I choose to go and have something in the morning, then I want to do it in my own time and rhythm. And my rule is actually very, very simple. Whenever my first meeting is, I set my alarm for 2 hours before I need to leave the room. So literally, I want a 2-hour buffer in the morning before I actually get going, which can be at times quite early. But that's I do not want to rush into my day, and I've got this actually from my mother. Who told me that a few years ago that she always does these 2 hours before she has to get up, and she actually has some crazy working hours. She's in Germany on television almost every week, hosting, and crazy hours at midnight, sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning. So she has crazy hours, but she always sets her alarm like 2 hours before she actually has to leave the house. And that's in general my rule. Even when I'm at home, I never, I don't want to kind of fall out of bed, rush into a meeting meeting or an appointment or whatever, I want to start slow. Now, people know me as the guy who's got lots of energy, and so when I hit the meeting, I want to be fully present, full of energy, ready to give and to add value. But for me, that actually means that I want to start very slow, and slow means just in quiet, in peace, and with coffee.
Yes, coffee is important. I actually travel with my AeroPress so that I know that the quality control is there, and I can make my own coffee with just some good hot water. I remember when I did a lot of traveling, and I wanted to get in my workout. My rule was that when I actually check in, the first thing before I unpack, I actually have to hit the gym. That was my trick to making sure that actually when you are in a hotel room every day at a different city, you really get in the workout. But let's talk about the morning now. We back in the day, both of us read the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. A shout out to Robin. He basically wrote the bestseller on why in the world should people get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And Cris, you and I, we both made that commitment at some point. We gave it up a little bit. You gave it up when you moved to Spain and you enjoyed the evenings more than just the mornings. But for many years, we actually got up at 5 o'clock. And there is a power to getting up early. Now, just before everybody has a bad conscience and we feel like we're wasting too much time in the morning, let me just tell you that when I try to get up early, it is, and it was a very difficult thing for me. I even know and even remember how I put basically my phone into another room in order for me not to hit the snooze button, because I love the snooze button. I love to just hit it and kind of know I have 10 more minutes to sleep. And when you want to get up early, and one trick is to basically put your phone into another room. And I remember actually getting up, walking to the other room, hitting the snooze button, getting back into my bedroom, going back into the nice warm bed and sleeping. The alarm clock rang again. I went up and got snoozed again. And I did this for 90 minutes, for 1.5 hours. Every 8 minutes, I actually got up, walked to the other room, and hit the snooze.
You're such a loser, man. Who hits the snooze button so many times?
Yes, so I just want to make sure that nobody feels like a loser, because I have been there, and I kind of had to laugh about myself. How in the world, why did I not just sleep 1.5 hours longer without getting up 8 times, walking into the other room? Now, I did that because I really wanted to break my routine of getting up early, because something magical happens when you get up in the morning and you have your time. So, Cris, tell us what you do first things in the morning. Why are the mornings important to you? And then I'll share some of the things that I am doing in the mornings, because for me the mornings are really the kind of really where you can design and you can build the life you actually want, where you actually are in control still. When before the world, your team, everybody else basically wants to control you, you can control your destiny if you can really control your mornings.
So I actually want to get back to kind of what you said about the 5 a.m. club. So I was part of that and got up early in the morning. And, thinking of it back then, I actually enjoyed the morning quiet, kind of, oftentimes before the sun came up, and you would hear the birds in the garden, and you could sit there and read and think and write and do good things. But actually the reason I stopped it was my wife. She was ready to get a divorce because I would always disappear in the evening very early to bed. And she said, like, what kind of a life do we have if I always disappear disappear in the evening. We don't have any kind of quality time together. And so to be honest, I gave it up for my wife. Now, having said that, I actually changed my philosophy on getting up early. Now I'll just tell you, kind of what I do, and everyone makes their own decisions on how to organize your lives. But I actually I set an alarm every day, but most of the time I wake up before my alarm. And the reason is I don't set my alarm so early. I really set it, as I said, kind of the 2 hours before I have to get going. But normally I actually even wake up before, and the reason I'm actually more fan of sleep than getting up early. If you want to pin it down, by now there's a lot of science out that when people kind of brag about how little they sleep, that they get up so early and stuff. I've read quite a bit of science on the fact that we all actually need the sleep. We need to be rested, and I can tell you it just changes my mood throughout the day if I'm tired. So I'm actually very obsessed about good sleep. So I actually sleep with earplugs. I put on these blinders that I don't see any.
You look
And
very sexy when you sleep. Is that what you're saying?
well, of course I do. Of course I do. But so I actually want to say, as much it's great to have a good morning. I actually love to have a good sleep because the good sleep is actually for me more important for the rest of my day than just having a good morning routine. So that's kind of my first comment here, is that I really believe in good and quality sleep. Now I also have this weird thing where I do my reading, a lot of reading during the night. So I wake up like 2 o'clock in the morning, and basically I pick up a book. When I'm alone in a hotel room, I turn on the light and a physical book. When I'm home, I read something on my Kindle, so not to disturb my wife. But I love to read during the night because it's quiet, no one disturbs me, and and it's nice, good quality reading time. Anyhow, now let's get to the morning routine. So I, when I'm home, let me just kind of talk about that. I never schedule any meetings, never ever before 10 o'clock. Okay, now that doesn't mean I don't do anything, let's say, productive before 10, but I really don't want to have anyone talking to me about anything business related or meetings or going somewhere. I really don't, because that is for me sacred time in the morning where I can do my reflections. I get out my notepad, I make some, have some of my thinking time. And when I'm home, I love to enjoy my time also with my wife. We love our coffee together in the morning. It is sacred to us.
Yes. So basically, sleeping. I also shifted my mind on that, and I make sure that I sleep 8 hours a day, a night, and sometimes during the day. It depends on the day. But but really, this idea of how much of your quality of life is dependent on the quality of your sleep, and how to really optimize for that. So that's when I went from the 5 a.m. club to the 6 a.m. club, exactly because of my wife, because we put the kids to bed. It's already kind of 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then we at least have an hour together. And if we don't have that, basically, I would also disappear, and my wife would not be happy. Now the question is not how early you get up, but actually how you design the mornings, and what happens in the first hours. Because most of us, pick up the phone first thing in the morning, and that's one rule that I really have, that the first hour my phone stays on flight mode. So I'm not constantly checking what happened. I mean, I don't have that on my phone anyway, so that is all blocked through an app called Brick, which basically blocks all distractions on the phone. But for family WhatsApp, or even I have these ideas to check AI, what about a certain thing I'm thinking about, or even just Googling something. I don't do it because I know it's like a slippery slope, to then be really distracted. So I get up at 6, because I know that my kid's gonna sleep a little bit longer, and I really take the first hour to design and journal on how did yesterday go? So what happened yesterday? What were the wins? What were the frustrations? What were the things that I'm proud of? And then also to kind of say, what are the results for the day? To be very specific, to be very conscious about not are going to happen, what's going to happen today, or what are my to-dos, but what results do I want to see and accomplish. I learned this from Tony Robbins a long time ago, that you really thinking about the outcome more than just the activity sets up your mind into the right kind of mood. And also when you have an important meeting, to not just think of the agenda, but to really think, what outcome, what's the goal, what do I want to walk away from with the outcome out of a meeting makes a big difference. And for me, this is a spiritual exercise. So for me, journaling actually is praying, is really communicating, also to realize, okay, it's not just me and my family and my business and my life, but it's also part of what I believe being part of a bigger story, and being connected to God in the journaling aspect. And for me, that first hour has been something that I have done over since I was 17. Basically, I have done that, and that for me is one of the most sacred and most beautiful things, to basically start your day really designing, reflecting in silence, in really solitude.
I think that's an absolute beautiful theme. I remember a story of me years ago, in a very hectic, stressful time, checking into a monastery in Fulda, and I think I share about this experience in one of my books, where I walk into a monastery where someone had recommended you can take some time off and actually, not just do a day trip, but actually stay a few days with the monks in a monastery. And I remember walking into this little cell of this monastery in Fulda, and on the table of that room, which was a very, let's say, it wasn't a 5-star hotel. Okay, it was a very Spartanic kind of a simple room. There was a little card which says, all the problems in the world start with someone not being able to sit by himself alone in a room. Mm. And this being alone with yourself, and in brackets you can say with God, because he's all present, is actually something in a hectic, busy, noisy world, something that I feel actually is really sacred. And I think so. What part of what you're describing here is a sacred morning where you just have some alone time. Now, obviously, you're also surrounded by your little kids here, which are the most adorable kids in the world, but also they are quite noisy, and I know that.
You've
Because I know
experienced it.
them, and I've had the same. So my house is not as loud and hectic. With we I don't have to get my kids out of bed and dress them up and brush their teeth anymore. But I can relate to that. And so, but this alone time. So the rest of the day, most of us, we're not alone. We're in communication, we're in meetings, we're surrounded by people. And now I'm an extrovert. I get a lot of energy out of people. I love being around people. You can dump me behind enemy lines, and I'll be happy fellow with a lot of people. But I also cherish, in a sense, solitude. And solitude, not just as once a year you go climb a mountain, but actually as a daily practice. Time alone. And my wife and I, we reflect about that often. She's more of an introvert, so she also needs that. And we often have this conversation about how actually this does miracles. It sorts out your mind. It sorts out your emotions. It sorts out, your worries and your anxiety. If you just have some alone time, and to start like that in the morning, I think is just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and for most of us, even if you would say I'm not a morning person, which I am not, that my snooze story I think is the evidence that I really am not a natural morning person. But I've not been able to replicate that at any other point in the day. I've tried, but my mind is racing. And so there is something to be said about being quiet, and in all spiritual traditions, it doesn't matter what religious background, there is a tradition of actually the power of the morning, in meditation, in prayer, in journaling. But so for me, that's my first hour. Then basically, I take care of getting my kids ready, and then I really don't have any meetings, so I push it basically to 2 o'clock. You do 10 o'clock. I do 2 o'clock. I don't schedule a meeting in the morning because I want to work on deep work projects in the morning without distraction. Now, I hope, basically giving some of these examples, I often hear like, oh, I could never do that. And it's not about, you taking on my schedule or Chris' schedule. It's about being intentional of designing how do you want your morning to be. That's why I love working with business owners, because we are actually the ones who can design however we want to live our lives. And I found out in my life, because I journal frustrations, I journal, reflect a lot about how I also kind of enjoy my life. I found out that I love my life when I don't have meetings in the morning, because I feel I'm accomplishing something there. I'm maybe more an artist than just kind of somebody who's just an operator, because I want to design something in the morning, and that might be a speech, that might be a talk, that might be a marketing campaign, that whatever it is. But I feel like I've accomplished something, and whenever I get out of a meeting, I don't normally feel like I've accomplished something. I just kind of kept the machine going. But the mornings when I really can focus on designing something, creating something, thinking deeply about certain things, well, then I feel like I feel a sense of happiness and contentment that I don't have if I'm just going meeting by meeting. So that's why I actually said I'm just going to start meetings at 2 o'clock, and the life works like that. And if you're a business owner, you are the one in control of how you want to design your morning. So I spend then from 8 to around 11 o'clock or 11:30 in deep work time, and then I go to the gym and work out. I only work out for half an hour every day, and then I'd go for an ice bath and for the sauna for another half an hour, and that basically is my morning. For me, that is a beautiful, beautiful day, because I've designed it that way.
No, I think that's a beautiful routine that you've developed, and I love how you describe this intentionality. If we can't design as business owners how we design our day and our week, well, then who can? This is fully up to us. And so so the big challenge here, at the end, is really to kind of do something intentional about about your calendar. Sometimes we have this procrastination disease where we kind of think in our mind about retirement. We think about once I'm done with this business, once I sold my company, once I did my exit or whatever, and then I'll do that. And I'm like, well, you know what? I know a lot of guys where this day didn't come, and because for whatever, the economy changed, this and that. So why not live your best life now? Don't wait for
Yes.
don't wait for some magic time in the future. Design it now. And now is never perfect. Now, there's always something, family, business, relationship wise, financial, whatever that is kind of disturbing, let's say, your peace and tranquility, well, then you still have to architecture on how you want to design your everyday. So it's really about the daily routines, daily lives, and I think we both share today that because of our life circumstances, we have different ways on how we do it. But I would say there's some great intentionality. We don't have the time to. I could share more about how I do stuff in the morning, but we keep that for another episode.
Yes. So a long time ago, I read a book from John Maxwell, Today Matters, basically one of my favorite books from him. He wrote a lot about leadership, but Today Matters is really this idea that success is measured, but by what you do daily and not what you do in a day or one day. So sometimes we think, oh, I just want to pack everything into one day, go to the gym once and get the perfect body. But the idea is what we do daily is actually what measures success. And I would say in our conversation, what measures the way we like to live our lives, the beauty of the life we are actually living. So design your life and really think on how you want to live an intentional morning. And I'm excited to hear you and be back in the next episode of Get Your House in Order. Cris wrote a wonderful book on the case study of Cosimo de' Medici. You can get it for free at medicibook.com. And looking forward to the next conversation. Thanks so much, Cris.
Thank you, Philip.